The scene opened with a strange silence. The lights were dim, the set was still, and everyone could sense that something serious was about to unfold. The director stood near the camera, holding his breath as if the next few seconds would decide the future of the entire project. Sandra Bullock stood at the center of the room, her eyes fixed on the floor, trying to steady her breathing. She had practiced this emotional scene again and again, but today something inside her felt heavier than usual. And right beside her, standing with his quiet strength and soft presence, was Keanu Reeves. He noticed the tension on her face before she even lifted her head. Something was wrong, and he felt it instantly. The hook settled in the air. The moment felt so fragile that even a single word could break it. Everyone was waiting for the next cue, yet no one dared to move. Sandra was supposed to begin the scene with a tearful confession, but her voice would not come out. She tried to speak, but her throat tightened. The pressure of the moment kept building inside her chest. She knew the entire crew was watching. She knew the camera was rolling, and still she could not push a single word out. She felt herself freezing, losing confidence, losing control of her own breath. And the strange part was that she did not understand why. Keanu took a slow step closer, keeping his voice low so only she would hear. He asked her softly if she was all right. She nodded even though she was not. She tried again to speak her first line, but her voice cracked. A few people in the crew exchanged nervous glances. The director shifted uncomfortably. Sandra felt her palms shaking. She hated moments like this, moments where her mind felt louder than everything around her. She wanted to do it perfectly. She wanted to give her best. But something unseen was holding her back. Keanu noticed every small detail. He noticed the way her shoulders tensed, the way her hands curled, the way her breath shortened as if she was losing the air she needed. He took one more step toward her, slow and careful, like he was approaching someone standing at the edge of a cliff. He whispered again, asking if she needed a moment, but this time she couldn't hide behind her usual brave smile. She looked at him with eyes that were trying not to break. And in that very second, Keanu understood exactly what was happening. She was overwhelmed. The director called for a small break, but Sandra waved her hand lightly, forcing a small smile. She insisted she was fine. She insisted she could do the scene. She never liked slowing down the work for anyone, especially not for herself. But her voice still trembled each time she tried the first line. She felt heat rising in her face. She felt embarrassment creeping in, making everything worse. She hated the idea that she was letting the team down. She hated the idea that she was letting Keanu down. The pressure tightened around her chest again. Keanu stepped in before she could fall deeper into her thoughts. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder, grounding her with his calm presence. He told her to look at him and forget the cameras. Forget the room. Forget the script for a second. He told her to breathe. She tried, but the tension still held on to her. And then he said something so quiet and honest that she felt the world pause around them. He reminded her that even the strongest people get overwhelmed. He reminded her that she did not have to be perfect every second. He reminded her that she was not alone. She felt something shift inside her. She felt her breath slowly returning. She met his eyes, and suddenly the seriousness of the room no longer felt like a weight. It felt like a moment they could take back control of. She took another breath, deeper this time. The energy inside her was still shaky, but she was not collapsing anymore. She felt a little lighter. But right when the room was beginning to calm, something unexpected happened. One of the lighting stands behind them started shaking from the ceiling vibration. The crew gasped. The moment was tense again. Sandra turned quickly and almost tripped on one of the props. The seriousness of the scene turned into sudden chaos, and as she stumbled, trying to catch her balance, the entire set froze. And then Keanu did something no one expected. Instead of rushing, instead of panicking, instead of adding to the tension, he stood firm, extended his arm in a dramatic slow-motion style, and with the most serious face possible, said in the calmest voice ever, "That is not allowed to fall today." The way he said it, with so much fake seriousness and perfect timing, was so unexpected, so ridiculous, and yet so perfectly delivered that Sandra stopped in her tracks. Her fear melted, her breath caught, and before she could hold it back, she burst into laughter. Not a small laugh, not a polite laugh, but a full, uncontrollable burst of laughter that filled the entire set. Keanu kept his serious face for a few seconds, pretending he had just performed some heroic act of preventing a lighting stand from falling with pure willpower. The crew stared in disbelief. Then the director started laughing. The camera operator laughed. The sound team laughed. Soon the entire set was shaking with laughter, and the tension that had been crushing Sandra broke apart completely. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time they were from laughter, not fear. She covered her mouth, trying to stop, but Keanu gave her a small smirk that only made her laugh harder. It felt like something inside her that had been locked finally opened. She felt free again, lighter, stronger. She realized that sometimes it takes only one unexpected moment to pull someone out of the pressure they are drowning in. Keanu then leaned closer and whispered softly so only she could hear. He told her that she did not have to carry everything alone. She nodded, still laughing through the last traces of stress. She felt grateful in a way she could not even put into words. The scene was serious. The moment was heavy, but Keanu had found a way to turn everything around. And without knowing it, the story of that day was only beginning. The next morning, the energy on set was completely different. Everyone walked in with a smile because the story of what happened yesterday had already spread across every corner of the studio. People were joking about how Keanu saved the set with nothing but a serious expression. Sandra heard two crew members laughing about it as she entered, and it made her smile in a way she had not felt in days. But deep inside, she knew the moment meant something much more personal. It was not just a funny scene. It was a reminder that even in stressful moments, someone could reach out and steady her without making her feel weak. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, trying to understand how something so small could shift something so heavy inside her. The hook began again when she stepped onto the stage. The room was brighter, yet there was a strange stillness when she saw Keanu standing with the script in his hand. He was reading his lines, but he looked up the moment she walked in. There was a softness in his eyes, the same softness that had calmed her yesterday. She felt a warm comfort just from seeing him there, but then she sensed something unusual. There was a slight tightness in his jaw, something he was trying to hide. She had known him long enough to recognize when he was carrying something quietly, just like she often did. Before she could ask him, the director clapped loudly and called everyone to their positions. Today was another emotional scene, one that required Sandra and Keanu to perform a heated argument. The script demanded intensity. The scene demanded energy, but Sandra still felt a subtle ache from yesterday's pressure. She tried to shake it off, reminding herself she was fine. She had regained her confidence. She had laughed. She had recovered. But emotions do not always follow logic. Sometimes they return in waves. The cameras began rolling. Sandra delivered her first lines perfectly, her voice steady, her emotions balanced. Keanu responded with the calm intensity that everyone admired him for, but as the scene progressed, something started feeling strange. Sandra noticed Keanu stumbling slightly on a line he had memorized hours ago. He recovered instantly, but she caught it. Then he hesitated on another line, barely noticeable to anyone else, but Sandra saw it. She watched him carefully. His posture looked normal, his face emotional but controlled, yet something was off. During a moment when the camera focused only on her, Keanu stood just outside the shot. She looked into his eyes as part of the scene, and there it was again. That tiny spark of something heavy, something he was not saying, something he was pushing down. Her instinct whispered that he was struggling just as she had struggled yesterday. And the more she noticed, the more she felt her heart tighten. They took a small pause to adjust lights. The director walked away, most of the crew drifted around. Sandra stepped closer to Keanu quietly. She tried not to draw attention. She asked him softly if he was okay. He gave the familiar answer he always gave when he didn't want anyone to worry. He said he was fine. He said everything was perfect. He said they should keep working. But the more he insisted, the more she knew he was holding something inside. She reminded him gently of what he told her yesterday. She said even the strongest people get overwhelmed and that nobody has to be perfect every second. Keanu looked at her with surprise, almost like he did not expect his own words to return to him. For a moment he looked away, taking in a slow breath. He said again that he was good, but his voice softened in a way that admitted the truth. He was tired. Not just physically tired, but emotionally tired. Something had been weighing on him, but he did not want to interrupt the work or burden anyone. Before they could talk more, the director called them back. Cameras rolled again. The emotional argument scene restarted. This time, Sandra performed with more focus because she was not just acting, she was watching him. Every movement, every breath, every subtle shift in his expression. She matched her timing to his, not only to keep the scene strong, but to make sure he had someone steadying him just like he steadied her. Then something unexpected happened again. During the final take of the scene, Sandra had to raise her voice at Keanu as part of the script. She delivered the line with intense emotion. But right after she finished, she saw Keanu's eyes lose focus for a split second. It was so quick that anyone else would have missed it, but she didn't. He stepped back a little too fast. His foot caught on the edge of a small prop box. He slipped. The entire set gasped. Sandra instinctively rushed forward, grabbing his arm before he could fall. The room froze. The director yelled cut. Sound crew dropped their headphones. Two assistants rushed forward. Sandra kept holding Keanu's arm, her heart pounding. He tried to laugh it off, saying he just stepped wrong, but Sandra didn't let go until he fully regained his balance. She looked at him closely. He looked embarrassed, but he also looked tired, really tired. And she could see it clearly now. He had been pushing himself too hard. The director came over, asking if he was all right. Keanu nodded politely. He said he was good. He said he could continue. But Sandra stepped in quickly before he took another step. She gently announced that they should take a short break. She said he needed water. She said it calmly, respectfully, but firmly enough that the director immediately agreed. Keanu opened his mouth to argue, but Sandra gave him a gentle warning look. The kind of look that said she understood more than he wanted to admit. The kind of look that showed she cared. He finally nodded and sat down. The crew scattered again. The room became quiet. Sandra walked to him slowly and sat beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She waited, giving him the space she knew he needed. Finally, he sighed and admitted softly that he had not slept well for days. He had been carrying too much stress. Life outside the set had been heavier than he expected. He tried to keep it together so the work would not suffer. But even the strongest people reach limits. Sandra listened without interrupting. The same calm tone he used for her yesterday, she now used for him. She told him it was all right to feel tired. It was all right to feel overwhelmed. She reminded him again that he was not alone, and she meant every word. Keanu looked at her with the same softness he had shown yesterday. A small smile formed, tired but grateful. He thanked her quietly. And for a moment they sat there, two people who understood pressure, pain, work expectations, and the strange weight of trying to stay strong when life kept testing them. But none of them knew the biggest twist was still waiting for them later that day. The afternoon sun poured through the high windows of the studio, filling the room with a soft golden glow. The break had helped Keanu regain some color in his face, but Sandra could still feel the weight of something unspoken hovering around him. She tried not to let her concern show too much because she knew he did not want to be treated like he was fragile. Still, she stayed close, watching quietly, making sure he did not drift too far into the stress he had been carrying. The crew started setting up for the next sequence, unaware that something unexpected was about to shift the entire mood of the day. The hook began slowly. One of the assistants approached the director with a worried expression. The director frowned, glanced toward the entrance, and then whispered something to the assistant. Sandra noticed the tension instantly. It spread through the air like a quiet ripple. She looked at Keanu, and he noticed it too. They exchanged a silent glance, both sensing something was off. The room felt too calm, too still, like the few seconds before a storm rolls in. The director walked toward them with careful steps, carrying a clipboard in his hand. His expression looked forced, almost as if he was trying to hide his worry. He told them they had to move quickly because an unexpected inspection team was coming to review the safety protocols after yesterday's minor equipment shake. Apparently, the studio wanted to make sure everything was safe. It was routine, but the timing was terrible. The inspection team was known for being strict, impatient, and not particularly understanding of delays. They were already on their way, and if they found anything out of order, the entire production could be paused for days. This meant pressure. This meant stress. And this meant Sandra and Keanu had to continue with the next scene immediately without losing a second. The twist grew stronger when the director revealed that the next scene was not a simple dialogue. It was a complex emotional scene with physical movement. That meant timing, coordination, and complete focus. Keanu took a breath, trying to steady himself. Sandra saw his hand tremble slightly before he hid it behind the script. She stepped closer and told him gently that they would go through it together. She reminded him that he had already carried her through moments when she froze. Now it was her turn to support him. He smiled softly, appreciating her presence more than he could explain. The cameras rolled again. The scene required Sandra to confront him about a deep misunderstanding. It demanded frustration, emotion, and raw energy. Keanu had to walk toward her, stop right in front of her, and deliver a powerful emotional line. The moment had to feel intense, almost overwhelming. Sandra took her position. The lights dimmed. The room fell silent. As Keanu walked toward her in the scene, Sandra felt something shift in his expression. He was supposed to show controlled frustration, but his eyes carried something heavier, something real, something he wasn't acting. When he reached her, he hesitated for a heartbeat longer than the script allowed. She looked into his eyes, and the emotion she saw there was not scripted. It was raw exhaustion mixed with pressure he had tried too long to hide. He still delivered the line perfectly, but his voice carried a trembling undercurrent, like a thin thread holding too much weight. Sandra responded with her lines, trying to keep the scene balanced, but her attention stayed focused on him. She could feel the inspector team walking toward the building. She could feel the pressure rising around them. She could feel Keanu trying so hard to stay composed, even though his strength was slowly draining. Then it happened, the moment that changed everything in the scene and in real life. As Sandra stepped closer to him during her part of the dialogue, Keanu suddenly blinked hard, as if the lights hit him too sharply. He tried to stay steady, but his eyes lost focus for a second. He swayed slightly, and before anyone could react, he took one step back and his knee buckled. Sandra shot forward, catching him again before he could hit the ground. The crew gasped. The director yelled cut. The sound team froze. It felt like the entire room had stopped breathing. Keanu shook his head, trying to stand, trying to pretend it was nothing. But Sandra held on to him tightly, refusing to let him push himself again. She told him softly that he needed to sit down right away. For the first time, he did not argue. His body had reached its limit. He sat down heavily on the nearby chair, his breath uneven. Sandra stayed beside him, her hand on his shoulder, grounding him. The director approached in panic, asking if he needed medical help. Keanu shook his head no, but Sandra shot the director a firm look that said they were not continuing until he recovered fully. The pressure of the inspection team approaching was still lingering, but Sandra no longer cared. The production could pause. The schedule could shift. None of it mattered more than Keanu's well-being. A few minutes later, the assistant rushed back into the room and whispered urgently to the director. The inspection team had arrived earlier than expected. They were already walking toward the set. The director looked horrified. He knew they needed the set perfect, the cast ready, the mood stable, but right now nothing was stable. Sandra glanced toward the entrance, then back at Keanu. She knew he was still dizzy. She knew he was trying not to show it. And she knew the inspection team stepping inside during this moment would make everything worse. She took a deep breath and an idea formed in her mind. It was bold, risky, but it might protect Keanu from more pressure. She stood up quickly and whispered to the director that she would handle the inspection team for a few minutes until Keanu recovered. The director looked confused, but Sandra did not wait. She walked toward the entrance before anyone else could move. As the doors opened and the strict inspection team stepped in, Sandra greeted them with the calmest smile she could gather. She introduced herself politely and immediately began showing them the safe equipment, guiding them toward areas far from the main set where Keanu was resting. Keanu watched from across the room, his breathing steadying slowly. He saw her doing everything she could to protect him from more stress, and the warmth in his chest grew deeper than he could explain. For the first time in a long while, he felt someone stand between him and the pressure he tried to carry alone. And he had no idea that Sandra's brave choice would lead to an even bigger twist later in the day. The inspection team walked deeper into the studio with serious expressions, their eyes scanning every corner as if they were searching for the smallest mistake. Sandra stayed ahead of them, guiding them through equipment, explaining lighting angles and distracting them with calm confidence. She spoke clearly, kept her shoulders relaxed, and made sure they never looked toward the main set where Keanu still sat recovering. Every step she took was done with purpose, each moment calculated to buy him time. The hook arrived when one of the inspectors asked suddenly where the actors were. His tone was sharp, his eyes suspicious. Sandra felt a small sting of panic rise inside her, but she swallowed it quickly. She told them the actors were preparing for the next shot and that the crew needed a few more minutes to reset the stage properly. She kept her voice steady, but inside she was hoping Keanu was feeling better. She hoped the break was enough. She hoped she hadn't made a mistake by stepping forward like this. While she spoke to the inspectors, Keanu tried to stand up on the other side of the room. He felt steadier but still weak. The dizziness had faded slightly, but the pressure behind his eyes lingered. He hated the idea of Sandra doing this alone. He knew she could handle it, but he did not want her to carry something meant for him. He tried to walk toward her, but his steps were slower than usual. The director gently stopped him, telling him to rest, but Keanu shook his head softly. He said in a low voice that he could not let her face everything alone. Sandra continued leading the inspectors through the side corridors. She showed them the secure cables, the strengthened rigging, and the updated lighting stands. The team followed her with strict expressions, asking questions that required quick thinking and precise answers. Sandra remained calm, even though her heart was beating faster than she liked. She kept reminding herself why she was doing this. She was doing it so Keanu would not feel more stressed. She was doing it because yesterday he stood by her during her hardest moment. Now it was her turn to stand by him. But then something unexpected happened again. One of the inspectors noticed a door slightly open near the back hallway. It led to a small storage area where unused props were kept. The inspector walked toward it and pushed the door fully open. Sandra followed him quickly, worried that something might look unsafe. But when she stepped inside, her eyes widened. The props inside the room were arranged incorrectly. Some heavy items were stacked in a way that looked unstable. Not dangerous, but messy enough for the inspectors to question the safety standards. The inspector raised an eyebrow with clear suspicion. He asked who was responsible for organizing this room. Sandra felt pressure tighten around her again. She knew the props team had been working late. She knew they were tired. She also knew that pointing fingers would only make things worse. Before she could answer, Keanu appeared behind her, standing taller now, his presence strong again. He walked into the room calmly, even though Sandra could see the exhaustion still in his eyes. He stepped forward and addressed the inspectors with quiet confidence. He apologized on behalf of the team and explained that they had been adjusting scenes late last night. He said the team would reorganize the room immediately. His voice was steady, respectful, and honest. The inspectors listened, still stern, but Keanu's tone softened the tension in the small space. Sandra looked at him with a mix of relief and admiration. Even in his tired state, he knew exactly how to handle people with dignity. One of the inspectors asked a difficult question about the stability of the new lighting stands. Keanu started to answer, but Sandra saw him blink too slowly again. She quickly stepped in, finishing the explanation with confident clarity. Together, they formed a smooth rhythm, helping each other, filling each other's pauses, and balancing the pressure perfectly between them. The inspectors finally nodded, accepting the explanation, but they still wanted to see the main set. Sandra felt her stomach drop. Keanu was not completely steady yet. She did not want him under that much attention. She opened her mouth to suggest another delay, but Keanu lightly touched her arm with a calm reassurance. He whispered that it was okay. He would handle it with her. They walked together toward the main set. As the inspectors reached the center of the room, the crew stood in perfect formation, equipment neatly arranged, cables secured, everything polished and clear. The room looked flawless. Sandra had helped hide the weakness of the day. Keanu had stepped up despite his exhaustion. Together, they had protected the entire production. The inspectors walked around with their clipboards, checking each part of the set. One paused near the lighting stand from yesterday, studying it carefully. Keanu and Sandra both waited in silence. The inspector finally nodded and wrote something down that looked positive. After a long, tense moment, the lead inspector turned to them and announced that the set passed the evaluation. He said they could continue filming without delay. The crew released a quiet wave of relief. The director thanked Sandra and Keanu repeatedly. The entire team began moving again with renewed energy. Sandra let out a slow breath she had been holding for too long. She looked at Keanu, expecting him to smile proudly. But what he did instead surprised her more than anything. When everyone turned away to their stations, Keanu stepped closer and whispered softly that he had seen everything she did. He said he noticed every moment she protected him. He said he knew she went out of her comfort zone to hold the pressure alone for a while, and his voice carried a soft sincerity that made her chest warm. Sandra told him gently that he did the same for her yesterday. She said this was what real teamwork looked like. She said this was how people should support each other. Keanu smiled slightly, and for the first time since the morning, Sandra saw a real calmness returning to his eyes. But just as the set regained its peace, the day took another unexpected turn. The director rushed toward them with urgency in his steps. He told them the next scene had to be done in one single perfect take because the natural light outside was changing fast. It was a long, emotional scene, intense, challenging, impossible to repeat once the daylight shifted. And Keanu and Sandra would need to perform it together while still recovering from the day's events. The biggest test of trust between them was about to begin. The air shifted inside the studio the moment the director explained the situation. The natural light coming through the tall windows would fade soon, and the next emotional scene depended entirely on that soft, golden glow. There would be no second chance, no room for mistakes, no time to reset the cameras or adjust the angles. The entire scene had to be delivered in one continuous take. The pressure was real, the stakes were high, and every pair of eyes slowly turned toward Sandra and Keanu. The hook appeared as Keanu looked at the bright window, blinking at the sun's angle. The gentle light reflected in his eyes, making the moment feel even more delicate. He knew he wasn't at his full strength. His dizziness had calmed, but the exhaustion still sat quietly behind his calm expression. Sandra knew it too. She felt a soft worry rising in her chest, but she kept her face steady because she didn't want him to feel limited. She walked closer to him, gently touching his elbow, asking softly if he was sure he could do it. Keanu gave her a small smile, the kind that held gratitude and quiet determination. He said he would be fine. He said he would give everything he had. He said they would get through it together. His voice held a calm strength that reminded Sandra of why so many people respected him. He didn't force himself to look stronger than he was. He simply chose to show up with honesty. The crew rushed to prepare the space. Large equipment moved aside. The lights dimmed gently to match the natural glow. The camera operator adjusted the lens with careful precision. The room settled into a focused silence. Sandra stood in her starting position, taking a slow breath. Keanu walked to the opposite side of the room where his part of the scene would begin. Their eyes met across the space, and something unspoken passed between them. Trust, understanding, respect. And the quiet promise that they would protect each other through whatever happened. The scene was heavy. Sandra had to express deep frustration, almost heartbreak. Keanu had to remain calm while revealing a quiet pain he had been hiding. The emotions were delicate, layered, and powerful. If either of them slipped even slightly, the moment would lose its authenticity. The director raised his hand, ready to start. The room froze. Action. Keanu took his first step toward her, his movements slow and thoughtful. Sandra turned toward him with a controlled mix of sadness and strength. Her voice entered the room like a trembling whisper, steady but heavy. She delivered her first lines beautifully, her emotions rising from real memories she never shared with anyone. Keanu listened with an expression that held quiet empathy, his performance capturing a deep truth he knew well. The sunlight slowly shifted across the floor, climbing the wall behind them. They had only minutes before the lighting changed too much. The scene built tension with every line. Sandra's voice grew stronger, her frustration shaping the air around them. Keanu's calm demeanor softened, revealing cracks of vulnerability that were not scripted. He wasn't acting tired. He was tired. But he used that exhaustion as part of the scene, turning it into emotional depth rather than weakness. Then came the hardest moment. Sandra had to walk toward him, tears in her eyes, and say a line that carried a powerful emotional punch. She stepped forward but felt her breath catch. The pressure of the day, the weight of the scene, the fear of messing up, all blended inside her chest. She almost froze again, almost lost her voice like yesterday, but Keanu noticed instantly. He took one small step closer, barely noticeable to the camera, but enough for Sandra to see the reassurance in his eyes. His expression said that she wasn't alone, that she could take her time, that he was with her in this moment fully. Her breath returned, slowly. She continued the scene, her voice steady once more. But then something unexpected happened. On Keanu's next line, his voice broke slightly. Not in the script way, not intentionally. It cracked softly like someone holding pain just beneath the surface. Sandra's heart tightened. She knew that wasn't part of the performance, it was real. The exhaustion, the emotional weight, the pressure of the day, everything he had been hiding had finally pushed through his voice. She didn't break character, she didn't stop the scene. She walked toward him gently, letting her real concern fuel her lines. The camera captured everything. The natural light hit her face in a soft glow. Keanu lifted his eyes to meet hers, and for the first time in the scene, his guard lowered completely. He wasn't performing any longer. He was letting the truth show. Their energy shifted. The room felt warmer, deeper, more real. The crew watching behind the monitors felt chills. The director leaned forward, afraid to blink. The scene had become something more than scripted emotion. It had turned into honest human connection. Sandra delivered her final powerful line, her voice trembling with controlled intensity. Keanu took a slow breath and replied with a soft honesty that shocked even himself. The moment felt like time paused. As he finished his last line, the sunlight reached its final perfect angle. Cut. The studio fell silent. No one moved. No one breathed. The director stared at them with wide eyes, his hands frozen mid-air. After a long moment, he whispered, almost in disbelief, that it was the best scene he had ever seen from both of them. The crew erupted into soft applause, overwhelmed by what they had witnessed. Sandra let out a deep breath, feeling her heart thumping. Keanu took a step back as if his strength was finally giving out. Sandra reached him quickly, steadying him once more. He smiled weakly, whispering that he was all right. The director approached them slowly, thanking them genuinely. He said the scene had captured something raw, real, and unforgettable. He said their connection made the performance powerful beyond anything he imagined. Sandra felt warmth in her chest hearing those words, but the real comfort came from knowing Keanu had managed the entire scene despite how heavy the day had been on him. Keanu leaned closer and whispered softly that he wouldn't have made it through without her. Sandra smiled gently, replying that he had done the same for her. She told him that their strength came from supporting each other when the pressure felt too much. But just as the crew began resetting the cameras for the next sequence, the unexpected twist arrived. A crew member rushed in breathlessly, holding a phone. He told the director that a sudden weather change outside was about to hit the building within minutes. Heavy wind, unstable temperature, possible equipment shake. If they didn't secure everything immediately, the entire set could be affected. The director looked worried. The team scrambled. Sandra and Keanu exchanged a tense glance. The day was not done testing them yet. The warning spread through the studio faster than anyone expected. The assistant repeated the message with urgency in his voice, and the entire crew shifted into action. The weather outside had turned unpredictable. The wind was picking up, rattling the tall windows. Lights flickered as tension in the air changed. Sandra felt a slight shiver run down her arms, not from fear, but from the sudden rush of energy moving through the room. Keanu looked toward the windows too, his expression tightening for a moment. After the exhausting day they had already faced, the last thing they needed was another challenge. The hook formed when the director quickly announced that certain equipment near the back wall needed to be secured before the wind pressure increased. Those items were heavy and could become dangerous if they shifted. The crew rushed toward the area, but Sandra noticed something immediately. The same storage door from earlier was slightly ajar again. Wind must have pushed it open. Inside that room were metal stands and boxes that could move if the air pressure changed. If something fell, someone could get hurt. She looked at Keanu, he looked at her. Without speaking, they both rushed toward the storage room. When they reached the door, the wind outside made a low humming noise that filled the hallway. Sandra pushed the door open and saw that several boxes near the top shelf had started sliding forward. The vibration from the wind must have shaken the frame. She took a step toward them, but Keanu extended his arm gently, stopping her. He shook his head softly, telling her without words that he would handle the heavier objects. But Sandra didn't move away. She stood beside him and said they would handle it together. They stepped inside, moving quickly but carefully. Keanu grabbed the heavier boxes while Sandra steadied the lower frames. The wind outside grew stronger and the entire building made a faint creaking sound. A soft vibration ran through the shelves. Sandra felt her heart beat faster. Keanu steadied the largest box, pushing it deeper into the shelf. She organized the smaller ones so nothing would slide out again. As they worked, the door behind them swung halfway shut from the force of the wind. The hallway lights flickered. Sandra felt a small rush of fear, but Keanu remained calm. He told her softly that everything would be okay, his voice steady even in the rising tension. She nodded, trusting him without hesitation. Suddenly, one of the smaller boxes on the upper shelf slipped loose. The angle shifted, the box tilted forward. Sandra instinctively reached up, but she couldn't reach in time. Keanu stepped forward instantly. He caught the box with both hands before it dropped. The weight surprised him, and for a split second he lost balance. Sandra grabbed his arm sharply, pulling him back to stability. Their eyes met, breaths uneven but both safe. The room finally settled as they pushed the last items back into place. The wind outside began calming. Sandra exhaled deeply, feeling the tension slowly leave her body. Keanu leaned against the shelf for a moment, catching his breath. He was exhausted, but his eyes held warmth as he looked at her. They walked out together and found the crew already securing equipment around the main set. The director spotted them and rushed over, relieved to see they were safe. He thanked them repeatedly for helping, clearly stressed but grateful. The team continued tightening cables, locking wheels, and stabilizing stands until everything was safe again. Sandra and Keanu stood near the center of the room, watching the team work. The natural light from the windows had faded into a soft gray evening tone. The chaos of the day had finally slowed. Everything felt quiet now, calm, almost peaceful. Keanu took a slow breath and turned to Sandra. He told her gently that he was amazed by her strength. He said she stayed calm in every difficult moment. He said she stepped in for him without hesitation. His voice carried a tone she hadn't heard from him before. It sounded sincere in a deep way, like gratitude mixed with admiration. Sandra felt her chest warm. She told him he did the same for her. She said he always showed up with kindness when she needed it most. She said the laughter he brought yesterday changed everything. She said the trust they shared today kept her going. Keanu smiled softly, his eyes warm and honest. For a moment, everything around them faded, and it felt like the entire day had brought them to this stillness. The director walked over and interrupted the moment with a gentle clap. He told them they were done for the day. He said their performance earlier was something he would remember for a long time. He said their teamwork was the reason the production stayed strong through every challenge. The crew nodded in agreement, grateful for both of them in ways they couldn't express with words. As people packed up and the lights dimmed, Sandra and Keanu walked toward the exit together. The air outside was cool, the sky painted with soft evening colors. Sandra wrapped her arms around herself to stay warm, and Keanu noticed instantly. Without saying a word, he handed her his jacket. She smiled at the gesture, her heart feeling full. They stood outside the studio doors for a quiet moment. The day had pushed them, tested them, and revealed parts of themselves they didn't expect. They had seen each other overwhelmed, tired, scared, and vulnerable. They had also seen each other strong, kind, supportive, and unexpectedly funny. Sandra thought of the moment he made her burst into laughter during the serious scene. Keanu thought of the moment she shielded him from pressure without anyone noticing. They both knew something had shifted between them. Not romance, not something dramatic, but a deeper understanding, a deeper respect, a deeper connection grounded in kindness. Keanu looked at her one more time and said softly that he was glad they were in this together. Sandra nodded and replied with a gentle smile that she felt the same. And as they walked toward their cars under the quiet evening sky, they both knew that the story of this day would stay with them forever.